48 Navy SEALs. One enemy aircraft carrier displacing 60,000 tons with crew of over 2,000. 40 minutes from first breach to complete control. Military analysts worldwide said capturing operational aircraft carrier was impossible. Carriers have too many compartments, too many personnel, too many defensive advantages for small force to overcome. Every simulation, every war game, every tactical analysis reached same conclusion. Boarding enemy carrier is suicide mission that cannot achieve objective before defenders organize effective response. What actually happened during those 40 minutes didn't just prove conventional wisdom wrong. It revealed tactical approach to ship boarding operations that changes fundamental assumptions about naval special warfare and what small elite force can accomplish against numerically superior opponent in confined spaces. But the reason why 48 operators captured carrier with 2,000 crew has nothing to do with superior training or equipment. It was one psychological operation that began before First SEAL ever set foot on ship. And understanding that operation requires waiting for revelation that transforms everything about modern naval boarding tactics. Just weeks ago, enemy nation deployed aircraft carrier to disputed waters as demonstration of regional military power. The deployment was political statement intended to project strength and intimidate neighbors. But intelligence indicated carrier had specific vulnerability. Crew morale was poor, maintenance was deferred, and operational readiness was questionable despite impressive appearance. American commanders saw opportunity for strategic operation that would humiliate enemy navy and demonstrate American special operations capability in unprecedented way. Not sinking carrier through conventional strike. That's easy with modern weapons. Capturing intact carrier with minimal casualties through special operations raid that would be studied for generations. The mission was approved despite skepticism from analysts who calculated that boarding any defended ship is nearly impossible. Boarding carrier is absolutely impossible. Welcome to Andre Navy Report, where naval power analysis meets operational reality. Planning phase. SEALs had 3 weeks to prepare operation against target they'd never trained for because capturing carriers wasn't considered realistic objective. Standard boarding tactics assume cargo ships or small naval vessels, targets measured in hundreds of crew, not thousands. Carrier presented challenges no previous boarding operation faced. Massive size with hundreds of compartments, large crew that could organize layered defense, numerous access points that made controlling ship nearly impossible with limited personnel. SEALs needed approach that made size and crew numbers irrelevant through tactics that prevented organized resistance. That approach would involve technology most people don't associate with special operations. Psychological warfare delivered through electronic means that attacked enemy crews' will to fight before SEALs ever approached ship. Week 1. Preparation. Intelligence collection focused not on carriers' physical vulnerabilities, but on crew psychology. Who were key personnel? What was command structure? What were internal tensions and morale problems? What communications did crew use? Standard intelligence preparation focuses on physical target characteristics. This operation focused on human factors because SEAL planners recognized they couldn't physically overcome 2,000 defenders with 48 operators. They needed defenders to surrender without fighting. That required psychological operation that convinced crew resistance was futile and surrender was rational choice. The psychological operation would begin days before raid and intensify right up to boarding moment. Week 2. Preparation. Technical teams developed cyber warfare package designed to penetrate carriers' internal communications and broadcast propaganda to crew. Not classified military communications. Those were likely too secure to penetrate quickly. Crew personal communications and entertainment systems that sailors used daily. Those systems had minimal security because nobody considers them tactically significant. But they were psychologically significant because they reached crew directly without filtering through command structure. SEALs would use those systems to deliver messages designed to demoralize crew and encourage surrender before raid even began. Cyber operation was ready 2 weeks before scheduled raid date, waiting for optimal conditions to execute operation. Week 3. Preparation. SEALs rehearsed boarding tactics not on carrier mock-up. Building full-scale carrier for training was impossible in available time, but on doctrine and principles. Small teams must move fast, avoid getting pinned down, control critical nodes like bridge and engineering, and prevent crew from organizing coordinated defense. Standard ship boarding uses overwhelming force. Board from multiple points, flood ship with personnel, systematically clear all spaces. SEALs couldn't do that with 48 personnel against ship this large. They would board from 2 points only, move directly to critical control spaces, and rely on psychological operation to prevent crew from mounting effective resistance while operators secured critical areas. It was an audacious plan based on assumption that cyber warfare and propaganda could achieve what firepower couldn't, breaking enemy will to fight. Hour 0, day 0. Cyber operation initiated. Propaganda began broadcasting to carrier crew through compromised entertainment systems and personal devices. Messages emphasized carrier was isolated, surrounded by overwhelming American force, targeted by weapons that could sink carrier in minutes, and that crew's only rational choice was surrender to avoid unnecessary casualties. Messages included imagery of previous American strikes on enemy vessels and detailed information about American capabilities surrounding carrier. Goal wasn't accuracy. Goal was creating perception of hopelessness that would prime crew to surrender when SEALs boarded. The psychological operation continued for 12 hours before boarding operation began, long enough to saturate crew with propaganda, but not so long that enemy command could identify and counter the psychological warfare. Hour 12. Insertion phase began. SEALs launched from submarine via swimmer delivery vehicle. Approaching carrier underwater from direction sensors were least effective. Surface approach would be detected immediately. Underwater approach using closed-circuit rebreathers that don't leave bubble trail gave SEALs chance to reach hull undetected. 4 teams of 12 operators each approaching 2 boarding points. 1 at stern near aircraft elevators, 1 at bow near anchor chain. Boarding points selected not because they were undefended. Everywhere on carrier was potentially defended, but because they provided direct access to internal routes toward critical control spaces without having to transit through numerous decks and compartments. Hour 12, minute 30. First team reached hull, attached magnetic climbing equipment, and began ascent toward flight deck. This is moment of maximum vulnerability. Operators on hull are exposed if spotted. But carrier crew was focused inward, dealing with propaganda that had been broadcasting for past 12 hours. Psychological operation had created enough confusion and uncertainty that lookouts were less vigilant than standard doctrine required. First SEAL reached flight deck edge at hour 12:36 36 without being detected. Immediately secured rope for remaining team members to fast rope up hull. Within 4 minutes, all 12 operators of first team were on flight deck, moving toward entrance to island superstructure, where bridge and primary control spaces were located. Hour 12:40. Second team breached through bow access point that led to hangar deck. This was high-risk insertion because hangar deck is large open space where defenders could see approaching operators clearly. But hangar was mostly empty. Aircraft were on flight deck or in maintenance. Few crew members present were shocked by appearance of armed operators emerging from access point that should have been secured. SEALs moved through hangar toward ladders and passages leading to engineering spaces. Second team's objective was securing engineering and preventing any attempt to scuttle ship or disable critical systems. Hour 12:42. First resistance encountered. Carrier security personnel responding to report of intruders on flight deck attempted to engage first team approaching island. Brief firefight resulted in security personnel casualties and withdrawal. SEALs continued advancing. This was critical moment. If crew organized coordinated defense, operators could be overwhelmed through sheer numbers. But psychological operation had worked better than planners expected. Most crew were uncertain whether to fight or surrender. That uncertainty created hesitation that allowed SEALs to advance rapidly without facing sustained resistance. Hour 12:50. First team breached into island and began clearing toward bridge. Standard ship design has multiple routes to any critical space, creating redundancy that makes defense easier. Attackers must clear multiple pathways, while defenders can concentrate at choke points. SEALs used explosive breaching to create new pathways through bulkheads, bypassing defended routes and maintaining momentum toward bridge. Explosive breaching is normally avoided on ships because it risks critical systems. But this operation accepted that risk because speed was essential. Operators reached bridge entrance at hour 12:54. Bridge was barricaded from inside, with crew refusing to surrender immediately. Hour 13. Second team secured engineering spaces. Minimal resistance. Engineering crew were technical personnel, not trained for combat. SEALs detained engineering personnel and secured critical systems, ensuring carrier couldn't be sabotaged. This was strategic objective. Capturing carrier intact meant securing all systems operational. If engineering was destroyed, capturing carrier was pointless. With engineering secured, SEALs controlled carrier's power and propulsion. Bridge crew had lost ability to maneuver ship even if they refused to surrender. Hour 13:05. First team breached bridge using flashbangs and assault tactics. Bridge crew surrendered immediately when confronted with armed operators in confined space. Ship's captain was detained along with senior officers present on bridge. SEALs now controlled bridge and engineering, the two critical nodes that determine carrier operations. But significant portion of crew remained throughout ship in compartments that SEALs couldn't possibly clear with available personnel. This is where psychological operation became decisive. With bridge and engineering controlled, SEALs used ship's internal communications to broadcast surrender demand to entire crew. Message was simple. Ship was captured. Resistance was futile. Crew should assemble in designated spaces to be detained without violence. Hour 13:15. Psychological effect of crew throughout ship recognized their leadership had been captured. Engineering was secured, and continued resistance meant fighting without coordination or strategic purpose. Propaganda that had been broadcasting for past 13 hours had primed crew to expect overwhelming American capability. Actually experiencing SEAL assault on their ship confirmed psychological messaging. Most crew began complying with surrender orders rather than attempting to organize resistance. Small groups attempted continued resistance in isolated compartments, but these were contained by SEAL teams until larger American forces could arrive to complete securing ship. Hour 13, minute 40. Initial objective achieved. SEALs controlled bridge engineering and had majority of crew complying with detention orders. Carrier was effectively captured, even though complete clearance would take hours more with additional American forces. From SEAL perspective, mission was accomplished. They'd achieved operational control that prevented Carrier from conducting any combat operations or evading capture. From crew perspective, situation was hopeless, and surrender was only rational option. The psychological operation had worked exactly as designed. But here's where operation reveals something most observers miss. Those SEALs who boarded Carrier weren't just special operations, they were psychological warfare specialists who understood that combat in confined spaces against numerically superior opponent requires attacking enemy psychology before attacking physically. Every aspect of operation, from cyber propaganda to rapid seizure of critical nodes, was designed to break crew's will to resist rather than physically defeating them through force. SEALs couldn't defeat 2,000 crew through firepower, but they could convince 2,000 crew that defeat was inevitable and resistance was pointless. That psychological victory was more decisive than any tactical victory through violence. Now for revelation that reframes entire operation. Remember that cyber operation broadcasting propaganda to crew for 12 hours before boarding? That wasn't just psychological warfare. It was also intelligence collection operation that identified crew members willing to cooperate with Americans. Several dozen crew members had responded to propaganda by communicating with American cyber operators, indicating willingness to surrender and provide intelligence about internal security and command structure. Those cooperative crew members became assets who provided real-time intelligence during raid and encouraged other crew members to surrender rather than resist. SEALs boarding Carrier weren't assaulting completely hostile vessel. They were boarding ship where they had allies among crew providing intelligence and encouraging surrender. That internal cooperation was decisive advantage that made capture possible despite overwhelming numerical disadvantage. Think about implications for naval boarding operations. Standard doctrine assumes boarding hostile vessel means facing unified resistance from entire crew. This operation proved that assumption wrong when psychological warfare creates division within crew and identifies personnel willing to cooperate with attackers. 48 SEALs captured Carrier, not by defeating 2,000 crew in combat, but by convincing significant portion of crew that surrender was preferable to resistance. That psychological approach changes calculations about what's possible in naval special operations. Ships previously considered too large and too well defended to capture become vulnerable when attackers can create internal divisions through information warfare that precedes physical assault. For enemy naval forces, this operation revealed catastrophic vulnerability in Carrier operations security. Their crew communications and entertainment systems were compromised and used against them for psychological warfare. Their internal morale problems were identified and exploited. Their crew's loyalty was tested and found lacking when confronted with sophisticated propaganda and apparent overwhelming American superiority. Carrier was captured not because American SEALs were better fighters, though they were, but because enemy crews' will to fight was systematically destroyed through information warfare before boarding ever occurred. That vulnerability to psychological attack is strategic weakness most navies haven't adequately addressed in carrier defense doctrine. For American special operations, this mission validated controversial approach to naval boarding that emphasizes information warfare and psychological operations over conventional assault tactics. Critics had argued that propaganda and cyber warfare were supplementary to physical assault operations, not substitutes for overwhelming force. This operation proved that information warfare can be decisive when properly integrated with physical operations. Small force achieved objective impossible through conventional tactics because information warfare created conditions where numerical disadvantage became irrelevant. Future special operations doctrine will increasingly emphasize psychological preparation of battlefield through cyber and information operations before physical forces engage. The broader lesson applies across military operations. Technology enables information warfare that can attack enemy cohesion and will to fight more effectively than kinetic weapons attack physical capability. Enemy with intact weapons and personnel, but broken will to fight is defeated without being destroyed. That's what happened to carrier crew. They retained physical capability to resist, but lost will to fight through psychological operation that convinced them resistance was futile. American SEALs captured carrier by destroying enemy psychology rather than enemy capability. That approach is future of warfare, where information dominance enables physical dominance through psychological effects that make kinetic combat unnecessary. Which factor dominated this operation? A. Superior SEAL training and tactical proficiency. B. Enemy carrier crews' poor morale and readiness. C. Information warfare that destroyed crew psychology and created internal cooperation before boarding occurred. The answer is C. SEAL training mattered. Enemy morale problems helped. But decisive factor was information operation that convinced crew resistance was hopeless and identified crew members willing to cooperate with Americans. That psychological preparation made impossible mission possible by ensuring SEALs faced divided enemy rather than unified resistance. 48 operators captured 60,000-ton carrier because information warfare had already defeated most crews psychologically before first SEAL boarded. Can adversaries defend against this approach? Not easily. Defending against physical assault is straightforward. More guards, better weapons, stronger barriers. Defending against information warfare requires controlling crew communications, maintaining morale despite propaganda, ensuring loyalty under psychological pressure, and detecting compromised personnel before they can assist attackers. Most militaries struggle with all these requirements. American advantage in information warfare and psychological operations creates vulnerabilities opponents cannot quickly address through traditional security measures. Carrier was captured because enemy couldn't defend crew psychology against sophisticated information attack, even though they could have defended ship physically against conventional assault. What does this mean for future naval operations? Capital ships like carriers are vulnerable not just to missiles and torpedoes, but to information warfare that can compromise crew loyalty and enable boarding operations previously considered impossible. Defending carriers requires defending crew psychology as seriously as defending physical security. That defense requires monitoring crew communications, countering propaganda, maintaining morale, and ensuring loyalty. All challenges most navies haven't prioritized because traditional threats were kinetic rather than psychological. This operation demonstrated that psychological vulnerability is strategic weakness that small elite force can exploit to achieve objectives conventional force couldn't accomplish. This operation proved that assumptions about shipboarding based on numerical ratios and physical security are obsolete when information warfare can destroy defender psychology and create internal cooperation. 48 SEALs captured aircraft carrier with 2,000 crew not through superhuman combat ability but through information warfare that broke crew will to fight before boarding occurred. 40 minutes from first breach to operational control because psychological preparation ensured most crew surrendered rather than resisted. That outcome demonstrates information dominance enables physical operations that would be impossible without psychological preparation. Future of naval special warfare is integrating cyber operations, propaganda, and psychological warfare with physical assault to achieve objectives through attacking enemy will rather than enemy capability. Subscribe to Andre Navy Report, where naval power analysis meets operational reality, where 48 SEALs demonstrate that information warfare enables capture of targets conventional wisdom says cannot be captured, where carrier boarding operation proves psychological dominance through propaganda, and cyber warfare defeats numerical superiority when attackers can convince defenders resistance is hopeless, where 40-minute raid achieves objective analysts said was impossible because information operations destroyed enemy psychology before physical operations began. Every engagement proves lessons about how information warfare changes what's possible when psychological preparation makes impossible missions achievable.